1. Back in the early 2010s, I started working for a big internet-based company in the UK. The company was opening a new office with a new subdivision in London. When I started, there were 2 team leaders and the office manager. The 2 teams were the content team and the SEO, search engine optimization team. I was recruited to be the development team lead, that is web development. When I was interviewed for the job, both the office manager and the SEO team lead were carrying out the interview. As you do in interviews, when they asked if this or that could be done, I would respond, yes, of course. Or, you would get a better result doing X, Y, or Z. So, I got offered the job, and for the first year there was so much going on. As well as building a team, I also had a portfolio of websites that needed to be redeveloped and redesigned. It was at this point that some red flags started to pop up. I would have the SEO team lead, Andy, coming to me and telling me that I needed to do things the way he wanted. I would always push back and say no and give a reason why I was doing things the way I was. Andy would get irate and would complain to the office manager about me. When the office manager would ask me about it, I would explain what had happened and why I had said no, and the office manager would leave it there, because at the end of the day I was the one with the experience in web development and not Andy. This happened a few times over the first year, and I then realized that the reason that Andy was getting so irate was because he thought that I would be a yes man to him. Sorry, buddy. That is not who I am. So now that we have the backstory, let's get into what led to the revenge. Me and the team had been working hard to get 2 of the new websites completed, and I was due to show them off to the board before they went live. This company's head office was in another part of the country, and I had to leave the office in London at about lunchtime. So I arrived at the hotel that is across the road from the head office about 4 p.m. and jump on my laptop to start going through the sites to run some tests. I was testing functionality, making sure the look and feel were correct, things like that. Then it happened. We found a major bug that caused a major issue with the functionality of the website. So it is at this point that I am going to introduce the star of our story, Johnny, who was the senior developer. Me and Johnny working through the night, me in the hotel room and him in the London office. We finally fixed the bug about 7 a.m. the following day. My meeting with the board was at 10 a.m., so after getting showered, fed, and over to the office, I started my day with 0 hours sleep. I got into the meeting, and the first thing that is said is the CEO asking if I was okay. I had met him a few times, and he was a really nice guy. I explained that we had found an issue with the site yesterday and that me and Johnny had worked through the night to fix it before the meeting. Long story short, everyone was really impressed and loved the new sites. At the end of the meeting, the CEO pulled me aside and thanked me for everything, and then told me to go home and get some sleep. It was about a 3-hour train ride to London and then another hour home. I thanked him and went on my way. So, after taking my team out for a well-deserved lunch to say thank you, the office manager then organized a night out for the whole office to celebrate on the following Friday. We started off at a fancy bar, not my sort of thing. I am a man of cheap tastes. And then everyone moves on to a small club. I go to the club for a bit, but then leave quite early in the night as I need to get a train home. I say my byes and then head home. I come into the office on Monday and there is something going on. I speak with Emma, the content team's lead. She does not know what is going on, but there are people from head office, HR, and others. Then a few minutes later, all the team leaders are called into a meeting. We are all squished into one of the small meeting rooms. There is the office manager, 2 members of the HR team from head office, and 3 team leaders, including myself. So HR explained that there has been a complaint made against Johnny. A member of the SEO team, Mark, had called Andy on the Friday saying Johnny had been making racist comments while everyone was out at the club. Both myself and Emma were taken aback. This was not like Johnny. On a side note, I feel that I need to explain the races of people involved. This is just for context and not an attack on anyone involved. John, Emma, and I are white British, Andy is African, born in Britain, I believe, and Mark is Indian, once again, I believe. So, the whole day was spent with HR doing interviews with the other people that were there that night, and then all reconvened towards the end of the day. The result of the interviews were that no one had heard anything like what Mark was saying, so it was Mark's word against Johnny's. This was not acceptable for Andy. He wanted Johnny fired and cried, "We could not have someone like that in the office." So, both Emma and I looked at each other and thought it was strange that he was so insistent on firing Johnny with no evidence. Both the office manager and HR agreed, and Johnny was let off with a warning, and to be aware in the future how things he says could be misinterpreted. Life went back to normal in the office. That is, until about 2 months later. The story of what had happened had gone round the office, about 12 people. Then one afternoon I was pulled aside by one of the guys on the content team, and he said that he had overheard Andy and Mark talking and thought I should know. We went into the meeting rooms and he laid everything out. What I heard made my blood boil, and I think had I been in a cartoon, steam would have been erupting from my ears. He told me that the racism complaint was faked, and a plan that Andy had to attack my team because I would not bend to his demands. Him and Mark were on call outside the club. Andy was not there that night. And that is when he heard what they were doing. It later came out that their plan was to make the complaint against Johnny and get him fired, which would then lead on to Andy complaining that I was not fit to run a team if I let that sort of thing happen under my leadership. My first question was why he didn't bring this up with HR in the interviews. He said that he did, but it was his word against both Andy and Mark. I thanked him for this and went on with what I was doing. I was pissed. There was no way that I was going to let this slide, but I knew that if I was going to go after them, I needed to have everything in place beforehand. I didn't tell Johnny what I had been told, and asked the guy that told me to keep it to himself for now. I didn't want Johnny to get pissed off and do something that would get him fired or worse, affect any revenge I could dish out, so I watched. I watched everything the SEO team did and didn't do. Then it happened. It was like the angels had descended from heaven to deliver me the winning lottery ticket. The building we were in was a 3-story building with a main stairwell with a door on each floor to the offices. The stairwell also led to a door out to the street. At this time I was a casual smoker and used it to get a break from this screen and clear my head if something I was working on was not going well. So I walk out of the door to the office and into the stairwell, and who's there? Mark, of all people. He is on the phone, and he goes white as a sheet when he sees me. Now he is mid-sentence with the person on the other end of the phone, and as I am walking past, he is forced to carry on the conversation. I overhear, and from what he is saying, I can tell he is talking to a school or something like that. The conversation is sounding like he was looking for information about applying about a visa. I thought that was a strange call to be having, and something was fishy about it. I had my suspicions as to what was going on, but nothing concrete at this time. A few days later, I was heading back up to the head office, and by that time we had a new office manager who lived near the head office, so was based there most of the time. When I got there, I dropped my things off at the hotel and headed over to the office. I went to his desk and asked to have a quick chat. I explained to him what I had overheard Mark talking about on the phone and said that maybe the company might like to look at his visa status. So a week went by and nothing seemed to happen. Then, bam! He stopped showing up to the office. A few days later I got told what had happened from one of the other SEO team members. Mark had been fired with immediate effect for no longer having the correct visa to work in the UK. The company did not want to get involved in sponsoring a new visa for him. I don't know why. I started asking questions around the office, random chit-chat, and I found out that Mark is from Dubai, and he was here on his wife's student visa. I don't know how that works, but it was all above board. I also found out that his wife's course had finished, and that left them with a small window of time to get a new visa. That is when it all clicked. Now, there are some dodgy people in London and everywhere else, and they would set up these fake colleges that would sign people up to get visas to live and work in the UK. At some point before or after this, I saw a program on this, and normally these were set up in tiny offices that you couldn't swing a cat in, let alone be a college. They were used as a postal address for the college, and they would charge a course fee to be enrolled and thus be able to apply for a student visa. So what Mark was trying to do is get enrolled in one of these colleges so that he could stay in the UK and carry on working. I found out a few weeks later that Mark and his wife did have to leave the UK and go back to Dubai because he didn't have any money coming in to pay for his new college course. Bye, Mark. When I found out that Mark had been let go, I pulled Johnny aside and filled him in on everything. He could not believe it, and was stunned that they would try to do that. I apologized to him, as it was my fault that he had been targeted by them, in a way to get at me. He would not accept it, and said that I have gone above and beyond in defending him. Following on from this, I made it quite clear to Andy that I know what he and Mark had done, and I would not be forgetting it and to watch his back. I made sure we were not in earshot of anyone else. About 2 months later, Andy handed in his notice and left the company, never to be seen or heard from again. I have told this story to some people over the years and have been asked so many times if I feel guilty for what I did. I always respond the same way. I feel guilty that Johnny was wrongfully accused and targeted. I don't feel guilty about what I did to Mark. You don't mess with my friends, family, or team. 2. Some 15 years ago, I worked in a local shipyard that focuses in repair work and refitting all types of ships. The yard resides in Europe. Now, it is important to note we have a 200-plus meter dry dock, and roughly the same in pier for outfitting. At this particular time, we had 2 medium passenger ferries docked, and they were moored on both sides of the dry dock's dam, leaving 50 meters between them, mostly water. I had a newish boss on the job after my old boss had retired. The new boss was very stuck up and entitled, so we shall call him Entitled Boss, or Ed. Other people that come up in this story are me, my co-worker Matt, and the first officer of the other ship. It is normal for our yard to be understaffed by a lot, by half, in the least. So a normal workday was between 12 to 16 hours, 6 to 7 days a week. We were all paid for all overtime, so we didn't mind. We were really busy on these ships, and they were moored aft to aft, so we were able to lift all the materials on their aft ramps with a crane. I worked with a crane as the guy who arranges the lifts and communicates with the operator at the pier. Matt did the same shipside. We worked well together and had done that together a lot. I was in my late 20s, Matt was in his 50s. This one morning, Ed comes to us to let us know of a new job. I have a small extra job for you to do, since you are not that busy. There are about 20 lifts on the pier, and more always comes by during the day, I noted to him. Matt was quite silent. He never really talked much anyway. I have a dredge coming in 2 hours. You will lift the bucket and the bucket arm off the dredge. A quick job, just lift the 3 things off. It can be done in 30 minutes. Just 30 minutes? Yes, they're detached already. Okay, boss. Matt looked doubtful. We started working, lifting all we could in 2 hours. Then we saw the dredge. This thing was big. The bucket was 30 tons alone, and the 2 sections of the arm were 60 tons and 80 tons. Oh, and the heavier bit was still attached. At this point I groaned, but Matt grinned from ear to ear and told me, "Boss's orders, boss's responsibility." Then I grinned. Cue malicious compliance. We got to work. We set the crane in position in a way it was closest to the dredge due to the weight. This also meant it blocked any other cranes from lifting either ferries, anything. We got the bucket unloaded on the trailer. This took an hour. Then we lifted the other half of the arm, and this took an hour to attach to the crane. Oops, lunchtime, union rules. Then 1 more hour to unload it. Now, the last arm bit was tricky. We had to suspend it from the crane and remove the pins that held it to the digger half of the dredge. The pins are relatively small, only 200 kilograms or 440 pounds each, and held in place by a few tons of pull or weight on the arm. It took us 4 hours to free the pins. So, any who are keeping track at this point, we were 7.5 hours into a half-hour job. At this point, some crew from both ships and a lot of people from the shipyard were watching us work. This was due to the fact that nothing had been lifted from the ship for the past 7 to 8 hours, and guys had to stop working. This is when I met a very excited and rad FO of the ship.
"What in the hell are you doing? Why are we not getting materials in?"
You need to talk to him, his orders, as I pointed at Ed on the dock. Not quite sure what was said, but the FO probably tore him a new one, and proceeded to stomp back on board his ship. I saw him exchange a few words with the captain of the ship, and the captain was dialing his phone. It took about 5 minutes for our CEO to get to the pier and proceed to chew my boss's rear. I'm pretty sure he was sitting funny after that. We finished the job right around 8 hours, and proceeded to lift our backed-up lift queue on board the ships. For some weird reason, he never told me how to do my job or had any quick jobs after that, as I had heard he was let go a few years later. Just to be clear, these lifts were difficult due to having to adjust the lifting cable lengths, and parts being so heavy. Also, the attachment point were fairly high up, and the cable we used to lift the weight around 10 tons, so we never stalled on the job, not our style, but we were very thorough in our work that day. Also, we broke a winch pulling the other pin, and had to get a new one. This took some time and explaining. 3. Last year, I was ordering an upgrade for the server room at work. It was a large, expensive upgrade that cost over $500,000. If you have ever had to call a manufacturer to order equipment at this amount, you may know that once you get a good reputation with a manufacturer, they tend to cut red tape for you to maintain a good working relationship with your company. I in the past have bought equipment for my personal use at home, and it takes forever to get a rep on the phone, and they often screw you on the deal. While I was making the order with the manufacturer, I inquired about getting personal equipment to see if it would be possible to make a separate order for myself with my own money. The rep had no issues with it and was happy to make the second order. He placed both orders and even gave me a company discount for my order. Now, I did make it perfectly clear that the second order was a personal order and not in any way connected to the corporate account or order. He confirmed this, and the order was locked. A few months went by, and the equipment showed up in the loading dock at work, and everything was in order. However, my order never arrived at my house. I attempted to contact the manufacturer, but got put on hold for hours. I gave up for now and figured I would try again in a few days. The next morning, the equipment showed up. It was an exact match for the equipment that was sent to my work. Now, keep in mind the order I placed for my house was a blade server that was just over $6,000 USD. This was not what I ordered. I went into panic mode as I can't afford this equipment, and when they bill me, I will be screwed. I checked my bank account and found no charges yet. Now I'm really panicked, as now I think they billed it to my company, effectively double charging them. I expect I will get fired. When I returned to work after my weekend, I emailed billing and got a copy of the invoice. Well, they didn't bill my company for the equipment they sent to my house. Now I'm really confused, so at this point, I drop it. It's a pain to get them on the phone, and I can't call the corporate line when it's a personal order. A month later, I got an invoice in the mail with a late charge for failure to pay. Okay, now I can get this fixed. They want $6,000 plus $250 for late charges. That's odd. I called the retention number and got a rep. I gave her the account number, and she told me she needed to transfer me to a manager due to the amount. Okay, cool. The manager picks up the phone, and I try to explain the bill is wrong and the equipment they sent me wasn't what I ordered. And he immediately cut me off with, "You need to pay the invoice. You're in violation of the contract, and we will sue you if you don't pay immediately." I tried again to explain the equipment issue, but again he cut me off and demanded I pay. So I told him I would take care of it then. I said sorry for being an inconvenience, and I will call my bank right away. I then confirmed the bill amount and the part order number from my equipment labels. He confirmed it and said, "See, there was no mistake." And as I was about to hang up, I know I heard him say in a smug tone to someone else, "That's how you deal with poor assholes." Called my bank and got them to unblock the transaction. It was stopped for a fraud alert. The amount was paid. I am now the owner of a $500,000 server room in my basement. A few months later, I had to order some more connectors for the fiber lines and spoke to the rep again. I inquired about buying personal devices again, since the last time went so well. Apparently they can't do that anymore. Something about a manager fraud investigation? Can't imagine what that's about. 4. This was quite a few years ago, when I was in the midst of separating from my then wife. I had found out that she had cheated, which is kind of relevant to the story. We were urgently getting our house ready to sell, and since we were broke, it meant unhappily cohabitating and doing a lot of the work ourselves. We had agreed to spend the weekend tidying the yard and painting window frames. But at the last minute, she said that her boss had asked her to take a colleague's place on a conference trip. Fine, I'll spend the weekend tidying the yard by myself. Sometime during the weekend, I noticed that my digital camera, this was in the days before ubiquitous smartphone cameras, was missing from its usual spot on the bookshelf. I needed some photos of it, so spent a while looking for it, but eventually gave up. Sunday night comes around and my ex returns from her conference, drops her bags, and heads straight out to a family dinner. The living situation being somewhat tense, we both found ways to keep out of the house. The camera had mysteriously reappeared in its usual place, but now with a big scrape on the corner, like it had been dropped on concrete. Now, this wasn't a top-end camera by any means, but fairly new and something that I'd paid for myself out of my meager pay. Luckily, it still seemed to work fine. The next day, while she was at work, I went to retrieve my photos from the camera and found the SD card full of photos of her on what looked like a romantic weekend away with a guy who I assumed was her boyfriend. So not only had she taken my camera without asking and damaged it, but she had lied about the conference and left me to work on my own so that she could enjoy a relaxing weekend with her new boyfriend. She obviously hadn't expected me to use the camera right away. I was ready to delete all her photos and call her on her BS, but for the sake of ongoing relationship property negotiations, I had to avoid drama. So I decided on some petty revenge instead. I transferred all her photos onto my computer and started to put my amateur Photoshop skills to use. I spent the next 1.5 hours going through every picture that featured her new boyfriend and editing his face in each one, giving him blotchy, pallid skin, subtly morphing his features to make him asymmetrical, making one eye bigger than the other, making his teeth yellow, giving him a slightly unhinged look, etc. I restrained myself so that it wouldn't be obvious that the photos had been edited, but he definitely looked unappealing in a way that you might not be able to put your finger on. I transferred all the photos back onto the camera, overwriting the originals. Then I put the camera back on the shelf and went about my day. The photos disappeared off my camera sometime over the next few days, so I guessed my ex had moved them elsewhere to cover her tracks. I never heard anything about my revenge, but to this day, it warms my heart that I ruined the memory of that romantic weekend for her. 5. I work at one of the busiest airports in the country. I usually grab a coffee on my way to work, but I didn't get a chance to do so today. I was halfway through my shift and decided to visit Starbucks at the terminal to get my caffeine fix. The international terminal has 2 Starbucks on the departure level. The one at the main concourse is usually packed at this time of day, so I placed a mobile order at the one located at the furthest point of the terminal. When I got to the Starbucks, I noticed it was just as busy as the main one, and there was hardly any seating left. As I was waiting for my drink, I noticed an airport employee, a wheelchair assistant, grabbing the last seat at the bar. She pulls the stool back and sees a cell phone plugged into an outlet underneath the countertop and placed on the seat. She picks up the phone and asks the gentleman sitting next to it if the phone belongs to him. A lady, our entitled brat, was sitting by herself at a table adjacent to the window, overlooking the airfield. She said,
"Don't touch my phone!"
at such a high volume that she caused the wheelchair assistant to jump back and almost drop the phone. Her movement caused the phone to become unplugged, which annoyed the entitled brat even further.
"Put my phone down before you damage it, fool!"
The poor wheelchair assistant turns a deep shade of red and sheepishly responds, "I'm sorry, I just wanted to sit down. Can you move your phone, please?" Wheelchair assistant has an accent, but she was still easily understood.
"I don't understand you. Speak clearly. What did you say?"
By now, the wheelchair assistant is looking very uncomfortable, but she once again asks if she can sit down at the stool. In a dismissive tone, the entitled brat says,
"No, you cannot. I was here first. Besides, you work here. Paying customers have priority over you."
To her credit, wheelchair assistant stands her ground and says, "I'm on break right now. I am a customer too."
"Then go to your break room and don't touch my property again, or else I'll have you fired."
The wheelchair assistant quickly walks away. Most customers are shaking their head over this encounter. One of the baristas that knows me tells me in a low voice that the entitled brat has been a problem since she got there. She demanded the Starbucks employees wipe the crumbs off her table before she sat down. No more than a minute later, my order is ready, and I go to the counter to add some sugar to my drink. At this moment, the entitled brat stands up and begins gathering her items. This really pisses me off. This woman knew she was leaving soon and still refused to allow the wheelchair assistant to have a seat. She grabs her 2 massive bags and walks past me and notices my airport badge hanging on my lanyard around my neck.
"Excuse me, can you please help me?"
I turn and look at the entitled brat, and I'm trying to decide if I should tell her off or walk away.
"Can you tell me what gate my flight will depart from? It's not in my boarding pass and it's not listed on the monitors."
I look down at her boarding pass and notice she's taking an international flight on American Airlines. Here's the thing with American. They have so many flights that they use the entire terminal that's next to the international terminal. In addition to that, they also use the international terminal for some of their flights. I know for a fact that her flight in particular will be departing from the international terminal where we were currently located. There were about 4 hours until her departure, and a gate had not been assigned to her flight yet. This was the reason it was not listed on the monitors yet. "You my PettyRevenge on behalf of wheelchair assistant." "Ma'am, you're at the wrong terminal. Your flight departs from over there." I point out the window across the airfield to the next terminal over.
"That can't be right. I was told my flight was leaving out of this terminal."
I nod my head in a sympathetic manner. "What probably happened, ma'am, is the person saw you were flying internationally, so they directed you to the international terminal. However, that's American Airlines terminal over there. As you can see, there are nothing but American Airlines aircraft parked at the gates over there, because that's the terminal they use." She looks over and sees the airplanes, and I notice her begin to get upset.
"I cannot believe that idiot made me walk all the way over here. Would you happen to know which exact gate my flight would depart from?"
"Yes, I do. The last gate over there is the one that's assigned for your flight." I point at the gate at the end of the terminal, which is about as far as could be from where we were currently located.
"Well, thank you for your help. You seem to be one of the few competent people working at this place."
I smile and reply, "You're welcome, ma'am. I want to ensure you get the service you deserve." I take the seat she vacated as I watch her struggle to pull her luggage, which probably weighed half as much as she did, and begin her journey to the other terminal. In all my years working at the airport, I have never purposely given someone wrong directions. I didn't feel too bad about this one. I briefly contemplated going to entitled Brat's actual gate when her flight was ready to board just to see her face, after having to walk back and forth over a mile. But I decided the risk of her scratching my face with her long-ass nails was too great. Instead, I enjoyed her seat and my coffee. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 341. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, do hit the like button. Thank you kindly. If you would like early access to these videos, that's easy enough. Support me on my Patreon, which is linked in the description. Click on the link, it'll take you right to it. You can do that for as little as $1 or more a month. You can also find the link to my Teespring merchandise store in the description there, if you would like to get yourself some Hellfreezer merchandise. And if you really enjoyed the video, well, you can leave a tip. You can do that by clicking on the heart with a $sign underneath the video. Okay, that's me done asking you for money now. Let's move on to the fun stuff. Right, no other business, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... And this one comes thanks to Newcomb on the Discord. What's your favorite season? Or would you prefer to live in a place with less seasonal variation, like closer to the equator? I would used to say my favorite was wintertime because it got dark earlier, and I did enjoy that when I was younger. But I think I prefer the summer more. That might be partly to do with the fact that you have to have less heating. But it is nicer to be able to go out and get your shopping done while it's still light. I'm getting old, man. What can I say? I think that's probably a sign of it. I do still prefer the night and being a night owl, but I like to go out, buy my groceries, do whatever else I need to do when I'm outside, then come home and snuggle in for the night, and then have a nice late night, you know? That's generally how I do it. So about 2 p.m. on average is when I get up, 2 or 3 p.m., if my sleep schedule is normal. So that's me. Why don't you guys let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, we'll have the question of the day from a previous video. And this was in relation to who is the newest or new to you comedian that you've discovered that you enjoy. And today's answer comes from Annie Northman. Drew Lynch, not necessarily new, but I like his humor. And a few of Mateo's shorts, I believe I was talking about Mateo Lane, being one that I had recently discovered in that context. A short popped up in my feed, and he is really funny. Also, Matt Matthews, I like his farm videos. Thank you very much for your answer, Annie. And with that, I'm gonna head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.